Bezat Hashem, I'm starting in Sephardi today. I get confused sometimes. I switch off, the mile.
I walk.
Ezras Hashem. Today in Maseches Shabbos, we're starting the bottom of Beis Amud Aleph. Today's Amud is going to be Beis Amud Beis, 2b. Okay, so Ezras Hashem, our learning today should be a Iloi Nishmas Kalman ben Natan, who was Dr. Beffler's second cousin. It was just Nifter, and our learning should be as a schus for his neshama and for the entire family, God willing. Now let's remember where we're holding in the sugya here. Yesterday we had a Mishna that taught us there's different times of hotza'ah, or yitzias ha-Shabbos, carrying on Shabbos, from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, vice versa. That's called Hachnasa, right? Hotza'ah is from the private domain to the public domain. Hachnasa is going from the public domain to the private domain. And we also taught in the Mishnah that there's also two additional rabbinic isurim, which is when one individual doesn't do both the akira and the hanacha in the other domain, but they split it. That's also usher on a rabbinic level. The kasha the Gemara is going to start off with here at the bottom of Beis Amud Aleph is that we have a Mishna in Maseches Shevou'os that seems to address the same topic about Yitzios HaShabbos, but instead of saying like our Mishnah, Yitzios HaShabbos Shtayim Shehein Arba, that there's two which are four inside and two which are four outside, instead the Mishnah just says as a flat rule, Shtayim Shehein Arba. So the kasha the Gemara is going to ask is, why is it that our Mishnah seems to be much more elaborate, Shtayim Shehein Arba Bifnim, two which are four inside, two which are four outside, and the Mishnah in Shevou'os says two which are four flat rule. Now, before we see this Mishnah in Shevou'os inside, I just want to introduce with just a brief idea. Sometimes in Shas we find this in Mishnayos, is that a Mishnah will group together different topics because they have a common category that they fall under. So in this Mishnah, by the way, in Maseches Megillah we have this. There's a whole sugya, towards the beginning of the Masechta, Zayin Ches Tes, like that area of the Ein Bains, where it contrasts ideas. You have a series of Mishnayos where it contrasts different ideas, but there's a series of Mishnayos with unrelated ideas. The only relationship they have is that it's contrasting two similar ideas, but dissimilar ideas one after the other. So here also, the Mishnah in Shevou'os is talking about how there are four different topics that are Shtayim Shehein Arba, two which are four. They're unrelated topics, but they're all written Shtayim Shehein Arba. Let's read that inside now. So the Gemara says as follows. Tanan Hasam, we have a Mishnah at the beginning of Maseches Shevou'os, and it says, Shevou'os, when it comes to Shevou'os, now Shevou'os bitoy, that means an utterance of a Shevou'ah, which the halach is if you make a Shevou'ah and you don't keep it, so you're chayiv a korban olav yored. Korban olav yored means that it's a korban that would fluctuate based on a person's financial standings. If he's poor, he'll bring a flour offering. A little wealthier, he'll bring a bird offering. A little wealthier, an animal offering. So the Mishnah there says Shevou'os, Shtayim Shehein Arba. They're two which are four. So Rashi explains what does it mean two which are four? Is the Torah says regarding Shevou'os, it's lahara or lahetiv. Is if a person makes a shvuah lahara, to do negative, literally it means, or to do positive. Now that doesn't mean bad and good, rather means to not do something or to do something. So for example, the shtayim that we're talking about that the Torah says lahara lahetiv means where a person makes a shvuah, I will eat, or I will not eat. That would be the shtayim. Shehein arba, what are the other two examples that you could also be chayav for if you make a shvuah, is in the past. If you say a shvuah that I did not eat or a shvuah that I did eat, and it turns out that he wasn't telling the truth. In all of these scenarios, you'll be chayev a korban, like we said, olav yor, which is a type of korban chatas. This fluctuating korban chatas, should you not keep your word or should you be lying? But these are shtayim shein arba. So you have two in the future, two in the past. It's two which are really four. Continues the Gemara Beis Amud Beis. Mishnah continues and says, another example of shtayim shein arba. Yediyos hatuma shtayim shein arba. The awareness of tuma is also shtayim shein arba. We know that if somebody's tummy, he's not allowed to go into the makom hamikdash, the Beis Hamikdash, and he's also not allowed to consume kodshim, korbanos, because it's kodesh. That's the shtayim. And if somebody does, when he's tameh, means he knew that he was tameh, he forgot that he was tameh, he made a mistake, he had a halama, he forgot, and he walked into the Beis Hamikdash, or he consumed korbanos, kodshim, he's chayav a korban olav yored, happens to be. That's the halacha. Shehein arba, there's another two examples regarding this, which is, he remembered that he was tameh, but he forgot that this was Makom HaMikdash or that was Kadshim. That's the Shehein Arba. 2 more that you'll also be Chayav Karban Olav V'Yored. Same halacha, it's just in addition, and these are all based on drushes. Similarly, continues the Mishnah there, Maros Negoyim, the appearance of Tzara'as, are Shnayim Shehein Arba. Also, there are 2 colors, which are really 4. So Rashi explains that the psukim in the Torah regarding Tzara'as tell us, the person has a white spot on himself, he goes to a Kohen, and he shows it to the Kohen. Now there's 2 types of colors, it's 2 types of whites. What's they called? 2 shades of white, I should say, that are the primary Tzara'as colors. That's called Se'es and Baheres. Rashi says Se'es is the color of snow, and Baheres is the color of wool. But then we also have Sheheim Arba, which is, there's Sapachas, which are the secondary colors to it as well. So Rashi tells us here, what are the secondary colors? Give me a second here. The secondary color to Baheres is Sid HaHeichal, is the color of the plaster of the Heichal. And the secondary color of Se'es is the white of the egg, the color of the white of an egg. So these are again Shtayim, the 2 principal shades of white, which are a total of 4. Now these are all Midaraisa again. It would be considered Tzaras and Tameh if it was Shtayim Shein Arba. And then the Mishnah in Shevou'os says, Yetzios HaShabbos, carrying on Shabbos, is Shtayim Shein Arba, 2 which are 4. Now it doesn't say bifnim and Shtayim Shein Arba bachutz like we said in the Mishnah. So asks the Gemara, Mishna hacha, what is the difference in Maseches Shabbos? The Tani Shtayim Shein Arba bifnim, Shtayim Shein Arba bachutz, that it says 2 which are 4 inside for the malabayis and 2 which are 4 outside for the poor, for the ani. What's the difference in Maseches Shevou'os? The Tani that it taught Shtayim Shehein Arba V'sulo. It just taught a flat rule Shtayim Shehein Arba. What's the pshat that the derech of the Mishnayos seems to be in confliction? Mishnayos in Shabbos with the Mishnah in Shevou'os. V'sulo, and it doesn't teach more than that.
Mishnah in Shevou'os is given different cases. The different.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just going stylistically. Where do we find things that says 2 out of 4?
Okay.
The Mishnah is out in Shabbos is going to expand on Shabbos.
But are there more cases? So then elaborate. If there genuinely are, which the Mishnah here seems to imply, so then it should have to say Shtayim Shein, then it shouldn't be included there. That's the point. Meaning, if there are more cases, so then it shouldn't be categorized with that Mishnah in Shevou'os, like our Mishnah seems to imply. So what's really the distinction? I.e., what category is being met? What's the criteria for the category in Shabbos versus that of Shevou'os? Really, that's the question. So the Gemara answers like this. It makes a shtickle like you're saying, but Hasam, this is the first attempt, the Gemara says. Over there, Maseches Shevou'os, the lav ikar Shabbos hu. Right? It's not the primary discussion of Shabbos. There really it's discussing halachas of Shevou'os, of vows, okay? So it's not the primary place of discussing Shabbos. So Avos Tani told us Lo Tani. And we're going to have to clarify this in a minute. But it only taught the Hotza'os, the carrying, the transference of domain, that are Avos, the primary ones, and not the Toldos, not the secondary ones. The derivatives, exactly. Now we have to figure out what they are, but fine. So the Gemara right away interjects and says, okay, but Avos ma'niu, what are the Avos? Now we spoke about this briefly yesterday. We know that when the Psukim in the Torah talk about carrying on Shabbos, really what's mentioned clearly in the Psukim is Hotza'ah. By definition, what is Hotza'ah? Taking something from Rishus HaYachid, carrying it and then putting it down in Rishus HaRabim. So that's the Avos. So says the Gemara, Avos ma'niu. Well, what are the Avos? Yetzios. That refers to taking from the private sector to the public sector. The problem is, if you look at our Mishnah, we know there's only 2 ways you could be chayav for Hotza'ah. What are the 2 ways? The ani stretches his hand inside the Rishus HaYachid, picks something up, brings it back outside and puts it down. Or Balabayas inside picks something up and then puts it outside into the public domain. But then you only have 2 cases. So asks the Gemara, the Yetzias Trehavin, it's only 2 cases. So then how would you understand when it says there, if those are indeed the Avos, you're saying it's only discussing the Avos in Shevou'os, so then what are the other 2? Shehein Arba. What's the Shehein Arba? The chi tema, so maybe you'll answer mehen lechiyuv umehen liftor. What the Mishnah there means to say is there's shtayim that are hotza'ah that you're chayav mid'oraisa for, And then there's another two of Hotzah that you're not Chayav Midaraisa, i.e., where they shared in the Akira and the Hanacha. Meaning, where, let's just take the examples of the Mishnah. The Ani put his hand into the private domain, Balabayas picked something up and put it in his hand, and then the Ani took it outside. So the Balabayas did the Akira, and the Ani did the Hanacha. That's a Hotzah that you're Pater. Or, if the Balabayas lifted something up in the private domain, and then put it outside, and the Ani took it from him and put it down. So again, either way, this would, then the way you'd understand the Mishnah there is, Shtaim Shein Arba, it says in Masechah Shevou'os, it means there's 4 Akiros, 2 of them are Chayav Midaraisa, 2 are Asa Midarabban and Pater. That's the way we'll understand that Mishnah. The problem is that contextually, as it's placed next to the other groupings in that Mishnah, that doesn't make sense. Because v'hadumya demaris negoim katani. It's written right after the colors of negoim, like we explained. Those 4 colors of negoim, of tzaras, they're all chayav, they're all asr midaraisa or tamei midaraisa. No, those are not midrabanan. Ma hasam kulu l'chiyuva, fachanami kulu l'chiyuva. Just as regarding tzaras, all of those shades of white are chayav or asr midaraisa, we should say. So too regarding the hotzos of Shabbos, naturally should all be chiyuva midaraisa, and you can't say therefore that 2 of them are midrabanan. So Elam Rav Papa says like this. This is how we could explain the distinction between the Mishnayos. Hacha de Iker Shabbos. So again, since our Masechta Shabbos is the primary topic that discusses halachos of Shabbos, carrying, for example, so Tani Chiyuvi Upturi. It taught the cases that you're chayiv and the cases that you're pater. Meaning, pater but means asr midrabanan. So it means it wanted to teach all of the options that are asr. There are some that are asr v'chayiv, which are asr midaraisa, and there are also others that are asr midrabanan, so you're pater. Fine. Hasam, but in Masechah Shevou'os says Rav Papa, Delav Iker Shabbos hu. That's not the primary discussion of Shabbos. That's really primary discussion of vows. So chiyuvik tani, we only taught the cases that you're chayiv midaraisa, v'tzerlo tani. Didn't want to teach the cases of patur that you'd only be chayiv midarabanan. So the Gemara again, oh yeah, but that's Gemara doubles back now. Chiyuve ma'nu. Well, what are the cases that you're chayiv midaraisa? Yitzios again. There's 2 cases of hotzah coming from a private domain to a public domain. One enacted by the balabayas and one moved by the ani, that you'll be chayav on a da'araisa level. So how do you get to the number 4? That's the kasha. Yitzias tarti havin. It's only 2. So the Gemara answers no, because there's 2 other ways you could be chayav midaraisa. What's the other ways outside of hotzah? Achnasa. So the Gemara answers, Shtayim da'otzah v'shtayim da'achnasa. You're right. There's 2 of hotzah where the item moved from inside outside, and there's another 2 ways that it could have moved from outside inside. What's the obvious kasha on that? That's not called Yitzios HaShabbos. That's the kasha. So says the Gemara, Shtayim da'otzah v'shtayim da'achnasa. But the problem is, Vayitzios katani. But the Mishnah in Shevou'os says Yitzios.
It left the outside domain.
Okay, it's against the teretz already. Yeah, but the kasha Gemara says
means to go into the open
No,
space.
Yitzios means to change.
So at face value, Yitzios would mean exit. Exit means from private domain to public domain. So asks the Gemara, but Yitzios katani. But the Mishnah in Shevou'os says private to public domain. So you can't tell me it includes achnasa, albeit that's asr daraisa. It makes sense, but that doesn't fit in the words.
There is another aspect which is not included in the Mishnah, is that if you move an object, first you have to pick it up.
We spoke about that. Akira and Anach. We spoke about that yesterday. Yeah, you're right. So Ravashi answers exactly what you're saying, Rapillo. Ravashi answers, Tana, the author of the Mishnah in Shevou'os, Hachnasa nami hotzah karila. Entry, meaning bringing an item from Rosh Hashanah back to Rosh Hashanah, is also called hotzah. We'll have to explain why that is. L'chara, these are opposite directions. But Hachnasa could also be called hotzah, could also be called yitzia. So where's the Mimai? How do we know this? So I'll bring you a raya. Because the Mishnah later, this is the Mishnah on Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, I believe. It's the 7th parak. The Mishnah there is listing the 39 malachas. And when it lists the 39 malachas, it says, Miditznan, it says there in the Mishnah, Hamotzi mershus l'reshus chayiv. It says, if you motzi, now literally means bring out, from domain to domain, you're chayiv for hotzah. So the Gemara says, we know that that's not only talking about from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, it's also talking about Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. Milo askinon, is it not dealing to Kama'ayil, Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, that you're also bringing back in, that's achnasa. V'kakari lo hitzah, and the Tana calls it hitzah. So therefore, clearly you see that under the categorization of hotzah could also be achnasa. So therefore, what we've just answered is, in Shevou'os, when it says, Yitzios HaShabbos Shtayim Shehin Arba, what it really means to say is you have the two avos which are hotza'ah, and you have the two toldos which are achnasa. They're all asamid daraisa. And the Gemara says, the Taimamai, what is the reason, Taka, that achnasa is called hotza'ah? So the Gemara answers exactly what you said, Reb Hillel. Kol akiras chayfetz mimkomo, the removal of an item from its current domain. Tana hotzah karila, the Tana calls it hotzah. Means hotzah does not mean exit. Hotzah means moving an item from its current state of position. Its position. Thank you. You move it from one domain to another. That's hotzah. That could be from private to public, or it could be achnasa, also from public to private. Either way. So therefore, what we've answered in this first teretz, before we see Ravina, first teretz the Gemara says is in Maseches Shevou'os we're talking about the Isurim D'Oraisa. What are the Isurim D'Oraisa? Hotzah and achnasa, and there's two ways that it could be done for each one: the balabayas and the ani. That's why it's shtayim, which are the avos. The toldos are achnasa, but they both are called hotzah because hotzah just means moving from one place to another. How do we explain our Mishnah now? Shtayim shein arba b'fnim and shtayim shein arba b'chutz. It means that you have two, which are really four. You have two cases of the Dairaisa, and then there's another two which are Isurim D'Rabbanan. That's not discussed in Shevou'os because that's not the primary place of discussing Hilchos Shabbos. But in Hilchos Shabbos, you have the two Dairaisa and the two D'Rabbanan, which is the Achnasa and the Hotzah of the Ani, Achnasa Hotzah of the Balabais. Good? And then the Rabbanan ones that come along.
If you think about it, you can also have Hotzah within the same room.
But that's not Aser. In the same room?
If you move in Muksa,
Muksa is a different story.
If you move in Muksa, then it's, you're not.
Mikomo l'chora means from domain, meaning private to public. We'll get into different shilas about that later, l'chayr though. Now Ravina says a different teretz. Ravina says the word yitzios doesn't mean exit, doesn't mean entry, and it doesn't mean moving from one domain to another either. Ravina says a different pshat altogether. Amar Ravina. Sorry, excuse me, I'm skipping a step. Ravina first brings another raya to this teretz. Amar Ravina, masnisa namideka. Our Mishnah implies exactly like you just said, that achnasa is included under hotzah. Why? The Katani, because in our Mishnah it said Yitzios. It says Yitzios HaShabbos Shtayim Shein Arba V'kam Mefaresh Achnasa La'alter. And the first example that our Mishnah brought was a case of Achnasa. What was the first example? Ha'ani Omed Bachutz Balabayis Bifnim Pashad Ha'ani Es Yadu Lifnim V'nasan Latoch Yado Shal Balabayis. The first example was the Ani picks something up in the public domain, puts it into the hands of the Balabayis in the private sector. That's a case of Achnasa. So clearly under Yitzios could be included a concept of Achnasa. That's a raya. Fine. Rava is a second teretz. So Shmami, no, that's a good raya. Rava says a different teretz altogether. Rava wants to resolve the stira between Shevou'os and Shabbos. Rava Amar Reshuyos Katani. Rava says Hotzah or Yitzios does not mean exit, doesn't mean entry. The word Yitzios is a bit of a chiddush we're about to say. It means a reshus. Yitzios means Reshuyos. Yitzios means domains. So the way Rav is going to answer the pshat is like this. The pshat in the Mishnah is Yitzios Shtayim. There are two domains, Shehein Arba. And there's four Isurim associated with that. Let's learn the Mishnah in Shevou'os. Now, in Mishnah in Shevou'os is going to say there's four Isuri D'Oraisa associated with that. Our Mishnah is going to say there are two domains with four Isurim for the Balabayis, four Isurim for the Ani. Two of those Isurim for the Balabayas are D'Oraisa, and two of those Isurim for the Balabayas are Midrabanan, and same thing with the Ani. But the word Yitzios is translated according to Rav as Reshuyos.
What's a nafkamanya? What
two different ways to learn pshat in the Mishnayos.
It's a nafkamanya, but there's really no.
Well, it's to resolve the contradiction. Two ways of understanding. I hear.
Right.
So Rav Amar Reshuyos Katani. The Mishnah means to say. Both Mishnayos actually mean to say there's two Reshuyos. There's the private domain and the public domain. Reshuyos Shabbos Shtayim. So the way you have to understand it is, let's speak through it again. First way we're learning, the first pshat in the Gemara is Shtayim Shein Arba means there's two Isurim, which are a total of four for the Balabayas, total of four for the Ani. And in our Mishnah, it means there's two Isurim that are Midaraisa, and there's another two that are Asa Midarabanan. Since it's Maseches Shabbos, we elaborate. Lechora, that means you're including Hachnasa under Hotza'ah. Hachnasa could be included under Hotza'ah. In Maseches Shabbos, when it says Shtayim Shehein Arba, it means there's two Isurim Da'iraisa that are the Avos, which is Hotzah, and then there's another two of Hachnasa, which are also Mida'iraisa, because it's included under the concept, which are also Mida'iraisa, which is Hachnasa. Second teretz, which is Rav, is no. Shtayim, Yitzios HaShabbos Shtayim, which means there's two Reshuyos, there's two domains. Two domains on Shabbos. You have Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah. Actually, there's two other domains, but those are of a rabbinic nature. Malkam P'tur and a Carmelis, exactly. We're not going to get into that today. But the Iker ones are Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah. Shtayim, Shehein Arba. So in Masechah Shevou'os, it means that has 4 Dairaisa Isurim associated, which means there's Hotzah, 2 Hotzahs, Balabayas Ani, and 2 Achnasos, Balabayas Ani. In our Masechah Shabbos, there's 2 Reshuyos with 4 Isurim, 2 of them being Daraisa, 2 being Darabanan for the Ani, 2 Daraisa, 2 Darabanan for the Balabayis. That's the way we're resolving the Mishnah. It's 2 different approaches in this Gemara. What's the nafkamina you're asking? What do you think? What's the nafkamina practically? Is there a practical nafkamina between these 2 Mahalchim? Rava does not want to say that Yitzia could define Hachnasa, that Hachnasa would be included under Yitzia. So he's avoiding that issue. That's just on a technical level, that's the distinction between the Pshatim. He's not forced into saying that. He can say, no, Yitzia is exit, Hachnasa is entry. He's not bothered by that question.
Well, you do have a difference in the 2 issues also, because Dalad Amos in the Rosh Hashanah is also carrying, but is not in the Rosh Hashanah.
Correct.
So I don't know if you define as Yitzias as a Shuyas, I don't know how you deal with that.
I believe that might be Allah Moshe Misinai, but we have to get, when you get there. I read the Art Scrolls introduction. It's fantastic, by the way. The Art Scrolls is an amazing job. Yeah, I believe it might be that's Allah Moshe Misinai actually, but I have to double check that. So that really is a chiddush in din, because l'chara there it's the same domain. So according to Rava,
It's distance rather than place.
right, meaning according to both of them, that's not a transfer from one domain to another. L'chara.
No, but if you say there are 2 Reshuyos that have 4, then but the Rosh Hashanah has extra, so it's not identical.
Well, but it's not. That's not included in this Mishnah, so we're not even discussing that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not even being discussed. It's a different Mishnah. We'll get there, God willing. All right, we'll stop here, Chevra. We'll stop at bottom of base and base. Bez Hashem. Pick up tomorrow with Gimel Amud Aleph. Great night.